Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, you ready for this Tank Bowl on Sunday coming up?
I'm as ready as I can be for what's going to be probably the most ugly and boring matchup of the weekend. I got to get up nice and extra early to watch some football on Sunday morning. Don't have time to sit and enjoy a good breakfast and prepare for the 1 o'clock games. No, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I basically got to just get ready as soon as I wake up to watch awful football be played.
Yeah, we're going to start with the Giants and the Panthers. Getting to the Jets in the second half was half joking around with the Tank Bowl, but obviously some major implications in this game as the New York Giants are 2-7, and so are the Carolina Panthers right now, and both teams very clearly in need for quarterback help. Bryce Young, the first overall pick from a couple of years ago, was benched, and he's come back in and hasn't really shown many signs of improvement here. But if you're looking at draft positioning, and it's only early November, like it's never fun when that's where you're at with your team. But I mean, come April, I think we're going to look back on this game and be like, this was huge for whichever team ends up losing this game.
Yeah, I think this one's going to have major implications on the 2025 draft order. The Giants, like you said, 2-7. So is Carolina. The problem with the Giants is that of all of these 2-7 teams, even the 2-6 teams that they're technically tied with in record, but not, if you look at all of them, the Giants have the highest strength of schedule of every single one. So therefore, every team is going to have the tiebreaker over the New York Giants, or at least it's projected to be that way. I think the strength of schedules can change throughout the course of the season. But right now, looking at Tankathon, the Giants have a very difficult path towards a top draft pick because of that strength of schedule. You're looking at teams like New England, like Jacksonville, like Carolina. Strength of schedule all significantly lower than the Giants at 0.531. Due to that 0.531, the Giants need to have a worse record, not a tied record, but a worse record than all of these teams. If it's a tied record, those teams will have the tiebreaker and pick ahead of the New York Giants. So losing a game like this versus Carolina is very important if you're looking ahead to the draft and you want this team to tank. Now, if you're looking ahead to the offseason and you want Brian Daboll to keep his job and continue to coach the New York Giants, then this is an important one for him to win. So there's a lot that's going to be determined, I think, by this game. Not now, but all the way off in the future. I think this game is going to have major implications for the future of the draft, for the future of the coaching staff, and everything else in between. And there's also the fact of the matter of if Daniel Jones goes out there, plays poorly in Germany against the Carolina Panthers, and the Giants lose this game, is he really going to be the team's starting quarterback going forward? That's another major question mark. So it's actually a shitty game on Sunday morning, but a very important one for the future of the New York Giants.
Absolutely. So wanted to go over to the Panthers here and take a look at some of the scores that they've put up. And I know they're coming off a win. They haven't had very many of those. New Orleans has fallen off the face of the cliff here. A 23-22 win. But you look at the number of points they are allowing each and every week is unreal. 47, 34, 36, 38, 40, 28. I know that if you're of the belief that you want Brian Daboll back and you want Joe Schoen back, their offense needs to score somewhere in the high 20s. Like this can't be like, oh, the Giants won, 15-13, like some disgusting, ugly, gross win, because that doesn't do anything for you. But at least if you're beating up on a poor team here, which is what you're supposed to do, and I know the Giants record is also poor at 2-7, but their defense, the Giants' defense, has played well for the most part this year. So if you're holding the Panthers to somewhere in the high teens, low 20s in points, that should be enough with how poorly the Panthers defense has played. It's just going to be a matter of, can the Giants actually string together some, offensive drives and get in the end zone?
Yeah, that's the question. And when you're looking at this team, the Giants, that is, do they have the capability to blow out anybody? Like, this should be a game where the Giants win handedly. This is a terrible Panthers team. If not for running into the Saints last week, they should only have one win on the season. This roster that they have is like historically bad on paper. They don't have talent anywhere. They just traded away two of their wide receivers. This team sucks. It sucks real bad. And if the Giants lose to this team, what does that say about this team? But even if the Giants win, but they don't win by a wide margin, what does that say about the Giants? This should be a blowout. I just don't think it will be, because I don't think this Giants offense has the ability to blow out anybody. Their highest scoring game this season against Seattle, they only scored 29. They have yet to cross over the 30-point threshold, and 7 of their points in that game where they scored 29 came from a blocked field goal at the end of the game. So the Giants just can't score points. They can't run up the scoreboard in any way. So even though they're going up against a very bad Carolina team with a bad defense and a bad offense as well, I just can't see a world where this Giants offense is able to explode and put up big time points for as long as Daniel Jones is still in their center.
Yeah, just because we haven't seen them really do it this year. The most amount of points the Giants has scored is 29, and you had a defensive score in that game. So, like, offensively, this team has to scratch and claw, and maybe best case scenario, they'll find themselves just scraping the 20-point mark. And that might be enough because, as I mentioned, Carolina, and specifically when they've started Bryce Young, have not put up a ton of points. They're going to rely on Chuba Hubbard. So, like, you know what it's going to be for this Giants defense. They're going to have to stop the run, and their pass rush is going to have to get home to rattle Bryce Young, which is something that they should be able to do. But again, like, just for if you're going to win looking good is basically my point that I wanted to bring up. Like, I think, as I mentioned, I think it was 15-13. Like, if they're winning a game where neither team gets to 20 points, like, I just don't think you learn anything about your team, and you don't feel any better about a win like that.
No, I completely agree with you. And what I'll say, though, to Brian Daboll's credit is, kind of at this point last season, we were having similar conversations. The Giants were about 2-7, and we were saying, okay, now it's time to start looking ahead to April. Should the Giants be tanking? Do they have what it takes to win? Now Daniel Jones is out for the season. What is Brian Daboll going to do? How does he respond? And when he was dealt the worst hand of any head coach, when he had his starting quarterback out for the season, he had offensive linemen all over the place out for the season, defensive players done for the year, he found a way to find 6 wins in that season. So Brian Daboll, I can't put it past him that over the final, 9 weeks of this season, or 8 weeks of the season, he's going to probably find ways to win a few football games. Giants fans are going to be pissed off because it's going to hurt their draft positioning. But this is a guy who's not looking ahead to 2025. He's looking ahead to each week, trying to just pick up a win, prove that he can win and coach this team into victory Mondays without a ton of talent, so that he could prove he is a good head coach worth retaining. So again, this is a must-win game for Brian Daboll. I think every game is. And this is one where, even though I don't think the Giants have a ton of talent, maybe they don't win it by a wide margin, but I have to imagine Daboll's going to do everything in his power to will this team to a victory against a bad Panthers team, knowing that if he doesn't prove that he can coach this team to win games like this, can he coach this team to win any important games would then become in question, and then his job would then lead into question marks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one that I think would raise a lot of eyebrows if that's, not the case, if they're unable to come away with a win. You mentioned it last year. They started 2-8. They ended up winning 4 more games after that to finish 6-11 on the season, with wins over Washington, New England, Green Bay after the bye was the big one. That was the big Tommy Cutlets game. And then, of course, the last game of the year, Philadelphia Eagles, to improve to 6-11 to close out your season. I I know that there's going to be a section of Giant fans who want to see the team lose and like want to completely bottom out to give themselves the best chance at the quarterback. And I'm not going to say that's the wrong way to look at it, because like this is such a quarterback driven league. And if in your mind, them giving themselves the best opportunity to finally get that answer at the quarterback, and this is what you want to see, like sacrifice a season for the greater good. I totally get that. From just looking at the Giants schedule right now and how they usually go here, I think you're going to find yourself in a spot where you're going to win a couple more games. So I want to give some Giant fans some caution here. Like, I get it. I know you're on a 4-game losing streak. They haven't looked very good, but if in early November we're doing the draft positioning talk, I just feel like at some point you're going to set yourself up for a letdown, because I still think this team probably finds their way to 5 wins, maybe something like that.
I think they end up with 5 or 6 wins. They're probably picking in the back of the top 10 when it's all said and done. And the Giants are probably going to have to sacrifice future draft capital to get the quarterback that everybody wants. They're probably going to have to trade up. That's just the reality of the situation, because as bad as this team is, this is not the worst roster in the NFL. They do have talent. They have the best defensive player in the NFL right now. That's going to buy you some wins. You have really good pass rushers like Thibodeaux and obviously Brian Burns. It's going to buy you some wins. You've got an elite rookie playmaker in Malik Neighbors. In fact, you might even have 2 of them with Tyrone Tracy in the mix as well. So this Giants team is going to buy wins. Plus, Brian Dable proved last year that even when the roster lacks talent, he will find ways to coach his team to win a few games down the stretch, which was an important thing for him to prove last year so that he could maintain his job going into this season. He's going to have to prove that once again, and I think that he will. So I know a lot of Giants fans want these 2 wins to be the only 2 wins that they get. It's not realistic. They've got some winnable matchups here. Carolina's bad, obviously, this weekend. They're probably going to win that, I would assume. Dallas on Thanksgiving is now a very winnable game with Dak Prescott injured and that team looking ready to blow it all up. New Orleans is maybe the worst team in the NFL right now. Baltimore is really good. That's not a winnable game. Atlanta, though, they're also very good, but I think they've been vulnerable at times. And then the Colts is another game that I think that's a team that's very vulnerable and winnable down the stretch, especially once you get into week 17 and teams start blowing things up and taking starters out of the lineup. And then the Philadelphia game, I don't think they'll win that, but you never know. Maybe they're resting their starters by then. So you look ahead to the schedule, there are a few opportunities for the Giants to win. It's not going to be easy for them to win any games, but it's possible. And so I think that the Giants fans just need to be realistic about that and recognize if you want to draft that quarterback in April, you're probably not going to be able to stick and pick and take that guy.
No, I agree with you. And looking at that schedule, like they beat the Eagles in the last week of the year last year. And, they look like they're going to be a playoff team. Now, maybe they're still fighting with Washington for like the division and they're not resting guys. I think that's what you'd have to hope for if you want to see the Giants lose in that game. But if their positioning is locked up and they can't really change where they're finishing in the order, we could very well see them rest guys, or their starters only play a half or something like that, and then week 18 win changes things for you. Wanted to get into the comments here, say what's up to people. Wild Wave asks, are we surprised the Giants stood pat at the trade deadline? I think based on your comments from the other day on the show, not overly surprised that was the way.
I'm not totally surprised. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't make a move just because there were so many rumors about Azeez Ojulari in particular. It felt like it was inevitable that they were going to trade him, even though I didn't want them to. So I am surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm just kind of in between. This Giants team is kind of difficult to predict. Even when you think for certain that they're going to do something, they usually don't. And sometimes when you think that they're never going to make a specific move, like the Brian Burns trade, they somehow pull it off. So it's just an interesting front office. You can't really predict their any next move. But with the trade deadline, a lot of fans upset that the Giants didn't trade Azeez Ojulari. Me, obviously, I've said I'm relieved. I think that was the right decision. I think he's still a young, ascending player, not necessarily to the same talent level that Xavier McKinney was, but similar in the fact that 24 years old going into free agency and a lot of chance or a lot of room for improvement still in his career, hasn't reached his potential. That's a player that I think you sign on a bargain contract. At least it'll look like a bargain in 2 years if he continues to ascend like I think he will. And I think the defensive line, while it's a strength of this team right now, if you traded away Azeez Ojulari, it wouldn't be a strength anymore. And you would have to bank on Kayvon Thibodeaux taking that next step. I think retaining Azeez Ojulari gives you a little bit more insurance for the future. But now the Giants have to get step 2 of this done. They elected not to trade him. Now they need to get a contract extension done. Otherwise, they will look like fools for not trading him. But my hot take was, if the Giants were going to trade anybody, it should have been Darius Slayton, because that guy looks as good as gone. We've been talking about this all year. He looks like he doesn't want to be here. Looks like he's ready to just run away in free agency and get himself a nice Gabe Davis-esque contract. Giants can't afford to give him that. I think he's gone, and that's the player that I would have preferred to trade.
Yeah, that makes sense. Ojulari, I don't think would be crazy costly to keep, and I think that was something that we brought up on last episode. Like, he's probably not going to get close to a $20 million contract, but if you're paying him as a rotational guy, I think there's some value there for sure. So I like that they didn't trade him, but now you have to take the next step and sign him. You can't do like the half measure of we're going to hold on to him and then you just let him walk in free agency and you get a comp pick 2 years from now. Dano says, honestly, I wish the Giants would get Neighbors involved earlier. As a fantasy owner, I agree. Last week, it seems like they didn't start firing at him until the third quarter. And once they did, they put together a nice scoring drive. Your take on that one?
Yeah, there's a couple of factors involved here. I think the first one being they just don't trust Daniel Jones to throw the ball. The first half of last week's game, they ran the ball goddamn near every single play in the first half. They just kept handing it off to Tyrone Tracy. They let Daniel Jones run the ball as well. He was definitely an element of their rushing attack, but they didn't want to throw the ball. And it's because of Daniel Jones. They're afraid to let him kind of run the game and run the offense, because as soon as they did let him throw the ball last week, he got blindside hit, wasn't ready for it, and fumbled the ball. And that's kind of what you expect when you put the game plan solely on Daniel Jones' shoulders. So it's kind of tough for them to get any of their playmakers involved when they're refusing to throw the ball downfield. And Neighbors is a guy who definitely needs a high volume of targets, but he also needs some targets downfield. I don't think throwing him screen passes necessarily does the trick, although I think that would be a clever way to get him involved in an offense when you're not looking to push the ball downfield. I'm in total agreement. I don't understand why it was only in the third quarter he started getting targets. I think it's utterly ridiculous. It's one of those things that makes me question Brian Daboll and his play calling. Like, what are we really doing here if we're not trying to get the ball to Malik Neighbors on damn near every single play? But at the same time, it's just it's difficult to do. It's difficult to game plan for a wide receiver when your quarterback holds back your offense.
It definitely is. But when you have a guy who is so clearly your best offensive playmaker and there's not really a comparable second option, like I understand teams are going to want to, or defenses are going to want a game plan to like take Malik Neighbors out of the game and say, all right, you got to beat us other ways. But if Brian Daboll is, as good of an offensive mind as he's billed as, he's got to come up with creative ways to get him the ball. Like, throw him a screen, give him the ball on an end around. Something, like Jones isn't afraid to throw the ball 5 yards and in. Sorry, I know that comes off as kind of harsh, but like you gotta figure it out, man. Like there's move him around, put him in the slot, send him in motion. Just there's a few ways you can go about trying to try to get him the football, and that's a comment that I agree with. I think it is something that they should try to do more.
Yeah, listen, I'll scream from the top of every building, give the ball to Malik Neighbors. Like, I'm going to be all the way in on that, not only as a Giants fan, also as a Malik Neighbors fantasy manager, several leagues. I have him. I'm very well invested in him. I need him to get the ball. There is one question here. Yeah, I have him in that one. I traded like everything to move up and get him. So, but there's a question here from Johnny Boy that I wanted to bring up here. Would you say Daboll is on the hot seat, or is it the GM? So I have this new take that I've kind of evolved on here related to John Mara's comments from a few weeks ago that I wanted to bring up on the channel and get your opinion on it. So when we talked about, those comments from John Mara, when he said he's going to be patient, he's making sure that he remains patient, he doesn't anticipate any firings at the end of the year. The way that we all interpreted that was, okay, those two are safe. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll, they're good. They're going to be here in 2025. The way that I'm now interpreting it after a few weeks is no mid-season firings will take place. This is going to be a situation where they wait until the end of the year and then they do a review and make a decision. This almost feels to me like it's John Mara saying, I don't anticipate any firings, but I will do my due diligence at the end of the year and see who's available. whether that again sparks the idea of a Bill Belichick reunion, totally possible. Maybe it's what's his name, Ben or Bobby Johnson, whoever. I think it's Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator of the Lions. You know,
Yep.
there's going to be names all over the place. This is actually going to be one of the more attractive head coaching off seasons, head coaching cycles this upcoming off season. So I think what John Mara is really saying is I don't anticipate making any firings, but let's take a look at how this season goes. And at the end of the year, we will make a decision based on where this team started and where it finishes. That's more of what I think that we're looking towards now, rather than just saying these guys are safe, no firings. I think it's going to depend largely on how many wins they buy themselves through the final stretch of the season, and more importantly, who is actually available in the offseason.
Justin has a good one, I think, too. I have a question for Anthony. If the Giants don't have enough assets to move up in the draft and get their own quarterback, do you fear not trading Slayton and Aziz will prohibit that?
No, because I don't think that the 2025 sixth round pick that they would have gotten for Darius Slayton or Azeez Ojulari really helps them much in trading up. I think that what's going to help them in trading up is future draft capital. So let's say that they're trying to move from pick 6 to pick 3, 2025 sixth round pick doesn't move the needle. 2026 third round pick moves the needle. So I don't have that fear. Again, these late 5th, 6th round picks sometimes are thrown in as sweeteners. I think a 6th round pick was thrown into the Brian Burns deal to help get it done. Yeah, it's helpful. It's nice to have, but at the same time, I'm talking about a 6th round pick. Name me a giant 6th round pick in the last 5 years that went on to become a truly great and established starter for this team. Those guys are very few and far between. So I'm not entirely worried about it. I don't think that it's going to make a major difference in impact and attempt to trade up. Like I said, I think 2026 draft capital is what's going to move that needle.
Hard agree. So clearly, if you're moving up from the example that you used, the first rounder from this year is there. Second rounder, I would also think this year would have to be a part of that. But then if you go to 2026, they have their picks in the first, second, third round beyond that. And the comparison that I always go to is because I saw my team trade up from 6th overall to 3rd for Sam Darnold, and they gave up 3 second-round picks. And clearly they pick swapped, so they moved up. So they gave up the first rounder in 2018, 2 seconds, and then another second the year after, or something like that. It was in total 3 second-round picks. Giants don't have the ability to do the 3 second-round picks, so they're going to have to do something else. But if it's for, the quarterback position, you might have to bite the bullet and throw in the first rounder next year.
Yeah, and you hate to do that. No team wants to do that. It's always reluctant for every team that does. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you hit on the quarterback position. Whatever you give up, even if you overpay to move up 3 spots, it doesn't matter if you get that quarterback. And that's the argument that I made when the Giants were negotiating to try and trade up and draft Drake May. A lot of Giants fans said, no, I'm not doing it if we have to give up a future first-round pick. Man, if we were sitting here with Drake May and we wouldn't be talking about the future draft because we wouldn't have that first-round pick. It's only November. I don't want to be talking about the draft anyway. But because we didn't trade up to get Drake May and sacrifice that future first-round pick, we are talking about the draft. So I think that's important perspective. Had the Giants just bit the bullet and shipped off more draft capital, maybe they would have a franchise quarterback starting for them right now, and we wouldn't even care about what our draft position would be next year.
Last one on the Giants before we flip over and do the Jets preview. Dano's back and says, Ant, you said it, the combo now was the same combo as it was 12 months ago. So I ask, what do you guys got to do different to avoid it being the same conversation 12 months in the future?
Find the franchise quarterback. That starts and ends there, right? I mean, whether you want Dable to be the guy coaching that franchise quarterback or not, that's a whole nother question. You can get into the offseason. You can decide to fire him or keep him and give him an opportunity to develop that rookie. That's going to be another conversation once we get to the end of the year. I think the reality of it is, though, he's got this year, next year on his contract. I think it expires. His contract is almost over. This is his 3rd season. It's a 5-year deal. So you can give him these 2 years, let him play out his contract, and then decide to move on from Dable if you want. I think that's totally possible. But, if you want to avoid having these conversations in the future, stop talking about, the draft. it's really like what I just said. If the Giants ended up trading away their 2025 first round pick to get Drake May, these conversations just wouldn't be happening. So once you get the franchise quarterback, you could stop looking ahead to the draft. But until then, every single year, it's going to be about who can we draft to replace Daniel Jones.
That's as simple as that may seem. I agree that I think that's the answer. A lot of questions begin to get answered with the change at the quarterback spot. So I think that's, unless you have anything else you wanted to touch on Giants Panthers, but I feel like it was a lot of future talk there, which is going to be the theme of this game.
Yeah, it's probably going to be the theme. There's really not much to say about Giants Panthers. Again, we'll see how it goes. I'm numb to the losing. I don't care if the Giants win or lose at this point. Just curious to see what the fallout is of this game. Again, if they lose, do they just leave Brian Dable, Joe Shane, and Daniel Jones in Germany and take the next flight back? Or do they win and start to reinstill some confidence in Jones and the offense? Who knows? Like, it's really, this game doesn't matter. Like previewing this game doesn't matter so much. It's going to be reviewing this game on Monday. We'll definitely have a ton to talk about.
Absolutely. So let's get to the Jets and the Cardinals. This is a really big game for, I think, both of these teams. The Cardinals are 5-4. They're a surprise 5-4 after rattling off 3 straight wins. And the Jets finally end a 5-game losing streak. And they are at 3-6. And, they got to keep stacking wins if they want to be taken seriously as a team that could salvage their season. The AFC, at least the wild card teams, being in this state of mid, for lack of a better term, just like very average to, mediocre. At the same time, it's a little frustrating because if you had just one game go differently, and you're sitting at 4-5 instead of 3-6, you probably feel a lot better about yourself. But that's not the reality that the Jets are in. The Jets are 3-6 here and probably need to get to 5-6 by their bye, which is in the next 2 games. But I think maybe this has stopped a little bit this week, but earlier on, after the Jets beat the Texans, I felt like there were a lot of Jet fans who were almost like chalking this one up as like, oh yeah, the Jets are going to win this one, almost automatic, which that's not where I am. I think Arizona is going to be pretty tough. They run the ball really well. They're 7th in the league in yards on the ground and 2nd in yards per attempt. And the Jets don't stop the run very well. So this is going to be a really tight game, honestly.
I agree. I think this is an underrated Cardinals team. They're young, and obviously, like you said, they've been exceeding expectations, having a winning record at this point in the season. But the Jets, you mentioned if they just won one of those games, that's the problem with the NFL, and that's the problem with both of these New York teams. The margin for error is just so thin. You really can't afford to make silly mistakes and drop games that you should have won, like the Denver one, for example. That's a perfect one to point out to for the Jets. Even the Buffalo one was close, and Minnesota game was only a 1-score game. So Jets had opportunities to have a winning record at some point this season, and then you'd feel more comfortable going into a game like this on the road against Arizona. But this is a Cardinals team that's red hot. This is a Cardinals team that's going to be playing at home. And Kyler Murray, yeah, he's had his ups and downs, but his ups are major ups. He has had some really explosive games this season. So this is not a walk in the park game for the Jets in my eyes. This is going to be, like you said, a really hard fought battle, but it is also a winnable matchup. It is one that they can find themselves on the winning side of. And then if they pick up this win, they're 4-6, then they do have an outside chance of a wild card spot. So it's a very important must-win game. I think every game here on out is going to be that for the Jets. But I think, like you said, this is one that I wouldn't overlook and chalk up to an easy win. I think this is going to be really toughly contested.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you just said it with Kyler Murray. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot against Chicago. He only went 13-20 for 154 passing yards, but he's pretty careful with the football. He doesn't turn it over a lot. On the year, I believe it's 11 touchdowns to just 3 picks in 9 games. I know he misses a lot of time, only 11 games 2 years ago, 8 games last year. But when he's out there, I think he's, definitely a solid quarterback. And we also saw their pass rush get home against the Bears this past week. The Jets offensive line play should be better than what the Bears have been. They've been like just flat out abysmal, but the Jets are banged up on their offensive line. They might have to play Olu Fashanu at guard again this week. AVT game time decision. John Simpson kind of feels like the same thing. Jake Glazer, who's their first backup guard, is also banged up. All three of those guys didn't practice yesterday. We'll see what happens today if they're out there. But that could definitely play a factor in this one too. When you look at Aaron Rodgers and his mobility, if the offensive line's banged up and the pass rush is working for the Cardinals, it might be tough for the Jets to keep pace.
No doubt. It's really unfortunate that every year we have to talk about the offensive line for both the Jets and the Giants. We thought that both teams finally fixed it this offseason, made some crucial moves. Illuminor for the Giants, obviously Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses for the Jets. They made some moves, but still, somehow, some way, it just never works out for our teams. And I don't understand it at this point. I have to feel like there's some sort of divine intervention. There's something in the cosmos that just prevents these New York teams from having a legitimate offensive line. I just don't understand it. Endlessly frustrating.
Yeah, it is endlessly frustrating. I thought this year would be different too. Dano saying stack the box, tackle better, or dominate top. Pick one, Jets. It's that's the way that they would have to win this game. They just haven't been able to show to me that they're going to tackle better unless they just go out and do it. I will say Hassan Reddick, I thought, had his biggest impact in that Thursday night game against Houston. He doesn't look like himself yet, but it's freeing up Quinnen Williams. It's freeing up Will McDonald. So I think the Jets pass rush is going to have to play a big factor in this one, even though I know I just spent a lot of time talking about how good they are running the football with James Conner. But if they're able to make them one-dimensional and take away the passing attack, that might play into a positive side for the Jets here.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think the time of possession is also crucial. I think the Jets need more long sustained drives. That ties into the offensive line, though. It's really difficult to sustain long drives and actually finish them with 6 points if your offensive line isn't playing well. But also the tackling better thing, that is super important. I mean, someone needs to just get Sauce Gardner at practice and teach him how to tackle. Like, you got to show him how to do it better. Give him the textbook fundamental walkthrough. Man, whoever you got to hire just to be the tackling assistant, tackling coach on the sideline, whatever. Find somebody to fix this problem. It's desperate. They got to get it done.
Did I tell you my Sauce Gardner take for this year? I don't remember if I said it on this show or if that was somewhere else.
I think I saw it on social media, but I also think that it'll be interesting to talk about. So,
okay. I think Sauce is playing hurt this year. I think he's playing through something just because I look at what he did his first 2 years and what he's played like this year. And I don't think you just lose it at 24 years old. And he hasn't been horrible, but he's just hasn't been consistent enough. And the tackling is a major, major issue. And it always kind of hasn't been a strength of his, but I feel like it's gotten worse this year. And you point to the first game of the year against San Francisco, he leaves, comes back, but was seen on the sideline like with his helmet and didn't look like he was ready to come back in. And then in a few games this year, he's gotten banged up, like had to come out for a few plays and then comes back in. I don't think so. I think something's wrong. And I'm not ready to just like throw away all my Sauce Gardner stock because of, the 9 games this year and not look at the 30 plus games he started before that. But like, as an outside perspective, like what's your take on Sauce? What do you think's wrong? And am I onto something here with that injury theory?
I think that you are. I think he's probably playing a little bit banged up. But then again, the counterpoint that I would make is it's week 9. Everybody plays banged up by this point in the season. Usually after the first month of the year, everybody's banged up. Nobody's playing at 100% strength and health and fitness halfway through the season. And especially once we get later into the year, once we get closer to playoff time, those players are playing with half of their strength missing. They're beat up after a long season. It's the NFL. It's really difficult. And Gardner just needs to do a better job of fighting through the pain and making the plays, especially physically in the run game and tackling. But I will also point out, I think that there is a little bit of a change this year in the NFL's officiating. And I think that might be affecting Sauce Gardner as well, just in terms of him being one of those really aggressive physical cornerbacks. Yeah, I know he's gotten the grabby label before. Maybe he is a little bit too grabby, gets his hands on the opponents and the wide receivers a little too often. I think that the way that he plays is fine. he's just not getting away with it maybe the same way that he has in the past, just because NFL referees have been calling those kind of bang bang, is it a DPI, is it not, plays a little bit more closely, and it's caused Sauce Gardner to have to adjust his game and the way that he plays a little bit, and that's also hurt him in his own right, on top of probably playing injured and not being able to be as physical as he wants. So I think that there's just a couple of factors here, not necessarily his fault. I think they're outside of his control. I completely agree with you. To sell your Sauce Gardner stock now would be an egregious mistake. He's going to bounce back, I think. I think he's going to have some elite performances down the stretch of the season. I just think there are factors right now holding him back a little bit. But it's way too early to lose hope in him as, a future and ascending superstar.
Yeah, and I like the point you brought up too about him getting more calls against him. And, it might take him a few games to adjust to how he's being called. Like he was able to get away with more his first couple years. And I think, there was a narrative that he grabs a lot, and, he does get away with some things sometimes, but I think part of it was a little bit overblown, but he's got to figure out what he can and can't do. And I think with more reps, and the longer that this season goes on, he will get better at that. I think the saving grace for this team, at least this year, while Sauce is going through it a little bit, is they have DJ Reed, who's been playing so good.
They have him for now until he signs with the Giants in the offseason. So,
yeah, expiring deal. He is going to get it. He's going to get a big time contract. Like I've seen some Jet fans are like, yeah, don't trade him at the deadline. They didn't. And we're like, you got to find a way to pay him. I would love to keep DJ Reed. I think someone's going to give him close to, $18+ million a year to be a number one. And I wouldn't blame a team on the open market for doing it because he's been that good.
I think the Giants are legitimately going to be that desperate team that does that. And I don't even know if he's really worth that considering his age. He's almost 30 years old at this point. He's 28, 29. At least he will be going into next season. I don't know if that's actually going to be a worthwhile contract for the Giants, but it's kind of similar to the argument that you made or that you make for this team when, in the past we've said, okay, just sign whichever guard is best on the market and overpay the shit out of them at $20 million because we desperately need a guard. It'll be the same argument for the Giants this offseason with cornerback. And I think DJ Reed is going to be the player that really gets focused in on for Giants fans. But man, he's been excellent for the Jets. You're right. That is a saving grace for them. This is a defense that's been wildly inconsistent on a game-to-game basis, but at least he has consistently been a very solid player on the back end of that defense.
Absolutely. Dano's got another question in here, which I think is good. How would you defend this Cardinals team? Do you load the box? And if so, what do you do with Marvin Harrison Jr.? Do you spy Kyler? How do you hold contain Marvin Harrison Jr., McBride, Kyler, Connor, Wolf? Like it's a lot of, they do have a lot of weapons on that offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
To me, I think what I would do is I'd let my corners go one-on-one with Marvin Harrison Jr. just because I think that's like the strength of this Jets team. Honestly, you might have to put another one of your corners on McBride just because of how banged up you are at safety. I think that would be the move. And I think Quincy Williams is the guy who you used to spy with Kyler Murray because of his sideline to sideline ability. But the thing I'm most worried about, it's not Marvin Harrison Jr. It's Kyler Murray and being able to tuck it down and run, and James Conner, who has had a few, I believe it's 4 out of the 9 games he's gone for over 100 yards, and I think there's a good chance he does it again this week.
Yeah, for me, it's make Marv beat you. That would be the game plan. Leave him out there one-on-one with Sauce and with DJ Reed. Make Marvin Harrison Jr. beat you. Take away the running game. James Conner is excellent. They've even got that rookie now starting to pick up some steam with Trey Benson. He had, I think, a touchdown last week. So stole that one from James Conner and my fantasy team, frustratingly. But, I think that's really got to be the game plan. Stack the box and get as many of your rangy and speedy safeties and linebackers on the field as you can to ensure that James Conner doesn't rip any big runs. He doesn't become this, clock chewing workhorse during the game, and also make sure that Kyler Murray doesn't rip any big runs and make sure that you keep him contained in the pocket. Leave those wide receivers out there one-on-one. It's pretty much Marvin Harrison Jr. versus everybody. Their receiving core is good, but it's really headlined by one main guy. And I think that needs to be your game plan. You have these 2 great cornerbacks in Gardner and Reed. Reed's playing great. Yeah, obviously, like we just discussed, Gardner has been struggling this year, Those guys are the focal point of your defense. That's your elite duo. That's where you like your matchups. Let those wide receivers try and beat you. And if they can't, if you're getting a great game out of Reed and Gardner, maybe you lock them up. Maybe you take away that rushing attack, and maybe this defense suffocates the Cardinals. That's your path to victory, in my opinion. But it really starts and ends with loading the box and stopping the run.
Yeah, I think you're onto something there. I think that's the way that I would go about it as well. Outside of Marvin Harrison, I don't really love that wide receiver room. Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch, or their others, like they could probably use another body in there. McBride's really good. I think he's, one of the best, young tight ends in the game right now. He's really a rising star. But I'm worried about the run game in this one, which maybe this is a good spot as we just cross over the 40-minute mark of the episode. Prediction time. Did the Jets make it 2 in a row and win this week, or was Thursday night a fluke?
I'm going to take the Jets to win. I think they are going to pick it up. I don't think it's going to be an easy win. I think it's going to be probably a 3-point win. I'm going to go with 24-21. New York Jets squeak one out on the road. It's going to be a tough one, like I said, but I really think it's, those 80 yards from the 20 to the 20. How can the Jets, or those 60 yards rather from the 20 to the 20, you got to find a way to slow down that rushing attack for the Cardinals, make sure that Kyler Murray doesn't have an explosive game, and keep them out of the red zone. The Cardinals, every time I'm watching red zone, I feel like I see the Cardinals in the red zone, scoring points, just basically hammering at home with James Conner. Keep them out of the red zone as best as you can. And I think that's your key to winning this game. If you can have a great red zone performance, red zone defense against this Cardinals team, you win this game. And so, the more we discuss it, the more paths to victory there are for this Jets team. Obviously, you need this offense to stabilize. You need Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson to step up. But that's where those are the guys who have been stepping up. I think those playmakers, Devontae Adams getting involved, Garrett Wilson, obviously explosive game last week. I think that this is absolutely a winnable game for the Jets. It's going to be a tough one because I think this is a very good and underrated Cardinals team. Jets are rightfully the underdogs, but I think they're going to pull out the underdog win, probably by a small margin of 3 points.
I think they can win. If they are going to, I think it's going to be a higher scoring game, like I believe it was Dano and Wild Wave were saying, like a 28-27. But I'm actually with Johnny Boy in this one. He says, I have us losing. I'm sorry, my dudes Connor and a heavy dose of McBride will kill us. I think they lose a tight one like 21-17. I want them to prove it to me first before I'm all the way back in. It was nice to have the win over the Texans. They beat a really good team. Yes, they're banged up, missing 2 wide receivers in that one, but there's a lot to like in the second half of that game. They don't travel well. They're not a very good road team. They don't play on the West Coast well. They don't do well after extra rest. There's just a lot of things that they would have to overcome and prove that they're not the same old Jets with. And if they do it, like, great. I want to be proven wrong in this spot. I want them to go out there and win this game and get their season back on track. And we could be excited about, getting to 5-6 maybe before the bye and talk about that Indy game coming up, a week from today. But I need to see them do it first. That's where my head is. And I think that's kind of what Johnny Boy is saying here too.
Yeah, I'm glad you're picking the Jets to lose. I think that's necessary and important because if we both picked them to win, I think it would be a guarantee that they end up losing. Yeah. So, I think it's a good thing you brought in some of that negative energy. Sometimes the Jets seem to perform better when we hand them some of that negative energy. So we'll see how it goes.
Now, I just realized I don't think we gave official predictions for Giants Panthers either. That's my bad. We were doing a lot of future talk. We just moved off of it. To close the show, Giants winning the Tank Bowl, and by winning, does that mean a win or a loss?
They are going to win this game. They're going to win it closely, which is going to be the problem. It's not going to be a convincing win. I think it's going to be 21-18, somewhere in that range. Just an ugly game. And that win is going to be viewed as a loss by many Giants fans. Probably all Giants fans are going to agree by the time we get to April that this win is going to be a loss.
I think the Giants win also. I'll go a little bit higher for the Giants. I'm going to say 24-16 win. 3 touchdowns. When was the last time that happened for the Giants? It's got to be a while.
Well, they had 3 last week. Daniel Jones threw 2 and ran 1 in. So That was a surprise. I think that one of those, while Giants fans point to that great throw that he had to Theo Johnson for the touchdown, they say, wow, look at him when you give him the support. That was garbage time touchdown. The Commanders knew that they had already won that game. That's how I view it. And I think
Come on, the touchdowns against prevent defense count too, right?
I
But in
guess
the yardage,
they count on your PFF grade and all that bullshit that Giants fans love to talk about. So I guess they do count in the end. But this is what I will say, preview for Monday's episode. Everybody who's watching right now, you're going to want to tune in absolutely on Monday, especially if the Giants lose this game, because if they lose, but after the game, Brian Dable says he's sticking with Daniel Jones, I'm going to crash out. I'm going to lose it. It's going to be ballistic, and it's going to be a sight to see. So stay tuned. Definitely stick with us Monday morning. We should have a lot to talk about.
We will have a lot to talk about. Selfishly, I'm hoping it's after a Jets win and a Giants loss, because I kind of want to see that crash out. And actually, long term, it might be good if the Giants lose. So that's not even really a hater thing for me.
Listen, if the Giants lose and Daniel Jones resultingly gets benched, I'm going to be celebrating. So I'll be over the moon if I finally see this guy get benched. So yeah, like I said, it's going to be a fun episode on Monday regardless.
All right, guys, that'll do it for us. Make sure to subscribe here on Big Apple Blitz, subscribe to Anthony's work on Fireside Giants, and subscribe to me over on Matt O'Leary NY. That'll do it. I'm Matt. He's Anthony. And we'll catch you next time.